we have a brief dip back into URC before the Six Nations gets underway next week. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. Round 10 of the URC, so it's coming at a time when we just finished the pool stages of the European competitions, whether it's Champions Cup or Challenge Cup. So teams coming off that, a lot of teams in decent form. South African teams, not so much, especially those that were in the Champions Cup, but back into the URC. Then before, for the European teams, then they've got the Six Nations starting in a week's time as well. So, a lot of kind of factors in there. And also, we've got, after this as well, there's a round, basically from the first round, right, where the South African teams didn't play too, that is going to come after this too. So, for South African teams, probably these games, kind of derbies and stuff, going to be more important. It seems like it was more important to a lot of them than the Champions Cup stuff. Hopefully, I want to see South African teams doing well in the Champions Cup, so hopefully that kind of attitude is going to change towards the competition. I think for it to change, though, we need to be a little bit fairer in terms of the ability for South African teams to actually potentially, play at home all the way up to and including semi-finals. That's not there at the moment, obviously. That's not possible. So we'll see how that changes. But it means, that there's a lot of different factors, as I said, in this. I'm expecting strong teams from the South African teams. They're playing each other, so it won't kind of skew against the European teams who, you're looking at it, it's 1 week to the Six Nations. You wonder, how many of the players are going to be available for these games. You imagine, like, a lot of them are in camp now with their nations and stuff, preparing for that Six Nations kickoff, which means we're going to get. One thing I like about these kind of rounds is you get to see the players who are probably going to start stepping up in a big way next year, putting in big performances in this kind of round where the regulars are maybe not available, and there's a chance there to really just prove yourself, in a round that, maybe fan-wise, some people think it's not that significant, but for me, these are some of the most significant rounds of the competition because, again, you get to see those players that you're going to be talking about, maybe not next season, maybe in 2 seasons' time, like, it's, kind of rounds where the likes of Sam Prendergast or Jack Crowley, if you're talking from an Irish perspective, like would have kind of be coming on the scene and getting their chances to be in squads or have starts or wherever it is, right? It's the same, I think, for all of the nations and all the teams as well in the URC. Is if you're kind of watching these rounds, you do get to see those kind of gems starting to come through. And I think it's going to be the same here. But also the other thing is, I've said this many times before as well, is that when it's when it's this kind of round where potentially you're going to have like weaker teams, the points still count the same towards the end of the year. If you get a win or you get a bonus point win, those 4 or 5 points, like, they don't come in asterisks. They're just 4 or 5 points on the table. And it can be the difference between a team making the playoffs and not making the playoffs, and that's why I think for a lot of teams, having the focus on these games and trying to make your moves around now can be significant because, like, if you look at the table, you got, let's say, Ospreys down in 14th, right, are on 17 points. And then, if like 5 points, so a bonus point win between their points total and 22 points that Edinburgh have up in 7th place. So, that's the difference you're talking, If Ospreys were to get a win and Edinburgh were to lose and not get a point at all, suddenly those two teams are on the same amount of points. Maybe neither of them are in the playoff places, but, Ospreys have made up a 5-point gap on one team, and it could be on a few different teams as well if results go their way too. So, it's that kind of thing that can happen, in these kind of rounds where, teams, they can get that win that lifts them up the table, and then it can, help as well that the players that are there who, are going to be playing while the big boys are away. They can get on a bit of a run, then the big boys come back and they have a boost from that. And suddenly a team that had a poor, start to the season, the first 9 rounds or so, suddenly start the second half of the season, they get on a bit of a run and they're in the conversation then for making the playoffs. So, I think a very significant round in the season, and we're going to go down through the games as usual. We'll just talk a little bit about each of them. We'll talk about the form that the teams have been in this competition, and then we'll talk about who I think is going to win each of them as well. So we're going to start with the Friday games, or now it's the Friday game because the Glasgow Connacht game has been moved to Sunday because of the storm that is expected to be raging tomorrow. So, or like even tonight, I think here in Ireland, and would have affected potentially the game going ahead, but certainly for fans travelling over and stuff like that. So we're going to start with the one Friday game that has survived so far, at least, and that is Ospreys versus Benetton. So it's on Friday, January 24th, and it's a 7:35 kickoff Ireland or UK time. It is at the Swansea.com stadium, and it's 14th versus 7th. And this one is on Premier Sports. I don't know whether it's on any Welsh TV stations or not. They don't kind of tell me that because I'm in Ireland, I think. But it's also on URC TV as well if you catch it. Hopefully it's on some, I don't know, BBC Wales or something like that. Because I know in Ireland we have like TG Cahir, which is the Irish language station that normally shows one URC game, and normally a lot of times it's actually the Connacht game. But yeah, it'd be nice to have that on TV over there. But yeah, Ospreys versus Benetton. So let's get into the game itself. So in terms of the placings in the league, Ospreys at the moment down in 14th place and Benetton in 9th, as I said. There's 5 points between them as well because they're on the same, Benetton, the same points as Edinburgh. They're on 22, but they're outside of the playoffs at the moment due to points difference. So, for Benetton as well, had a very mixed season, came into a bit of form, kind of over the Christmas period. Well, that helped, they're playing Zebre twice, but, Zebre haven't had a terrible season themselves, comparatively, to other seasons for them. And also, a decent form from the Champions Cup as well, beating Bath and La Rochelle there to qualify for the last 16. And, we look at how Ospreys has gone, recently picked up a little bit, in their last 4 games, they had a win against Edinburgh, which was decent because they hadn't won for ages before that. Then they lost against Zebre by 5 points. Not great for them, but very good for Zebre getting a second win of the season. Then beat Scarlets by a point, and then a draw against Cardiff as well. Over the Christmas there, and but the thing is, before that, they were on a losing streak. So in their last 7 games, they have those 2 wins and a draw with 4 losses as well. Benetton then, very up and down, honestly, from them. The last 7 games, they first of all lost heavily to Leinster, then wins against the Sharks and the Dragons. The Sharks, they won by 28 points. Dragons beat them by 10 points. Then an hour loss against the Bulls, and then fairly comprehensive loss against Edinburgh. before, 1 point win against Zebre and then a 12-point win against Zebre. But it really helped them, those 2 matches against Zebre, because they were, down towards like where Ospreys and Connacht, those kind of teams, at that time. So it really helped them there. And then in Europe as well, it seemed to help them too. So they're coming into a bit of form, but again, you don't know how many of these players are going to be available, given that, Italy are kicking off their Six Nations campaign, and, did Benetton provide a good chunk of that squad. So looking at this, it's a tough one to pick, and I'm going to go with home advantage, I think. So I'm going to go for an Ospreys win in that game, and I'm probably actually going to cover it, because I had, initially plan was the initial plan was to cover the Glasgow Connacht game on Friday, but now this is the one game that's on Friday. So yeah, I'm probably going to cover that on the channel with a full review. So watch out for that. But yeah, going for an Ospreys win in that one. On to the next one then. It is the first of the South African derbies in this round. So it is a 12:45 kickoff. So I think that's 2:45 in South Africa. It's Emirates Lions versus Vodacom Bulls. They're 12th versus 4th. And this is at Emirates Airlines Park. It's on Premier Sport. You can find it on Now TV as well and URC TV. So, looking at these teams, like the Bulls have kind of, they progressed through the season, right? They've kind of improved in the URC. Lions had a brilliant start to the season, and now they've fallen away a little bit, which is, not, the kind of Christmas period, I think, for them, it was good for Benetton, it was bad for the Lions, because they went from being right up there, where the Bulls are now, Bulls in 4th place. Lions were up there 4th or 5th in the table, and then over the Christmas, a couple of losses, and suddenly they find themselves down in 12th place. But if we look at the form, like the Lions were on a hot streak of form, beat Ulster by 13 points, then Edinburgh by 34, Dragons by 4 points, and then Zebre by 1. So that was kind of the European tour, and then ended then with an 18-point loss to Leinster. Then over the Christmas period, end of November, first of all, they lost to Munster by 7 points, and then they lost to the Stormers then in December by 19 points. Then if we look at the Bulls, Bulls had a slow start to the season, but in the last 7, beat Edinburgh by 6. Then they beat Ulster pretty handily by 26. Beat Ospreys by 10. Lost to the Scarlets by 1, which was a bit of a shock, because again, they were in a bit of form, and Scarlets were kind of up and down at that stage. Then beat Benetton by 2 points. Beat Connacht by 14. Connacht would have been a bit more competitive in that game, but Connacht are another one who are kind of, very inconsistent. And then that loss against the Sharks then by 3 points on the 21st of December, so over the Christmas period there. So this is kind of an interesting one where, Lions have lost the last 3, but before that they were on really good form. The Bulls have come good a little bit, although, their Champions Cup campaign wasn't great. And again, it's, a lot of it then is down to selection, right? But for them as well, it was kind of tough, given that, who did they have? They had Bordeaux and... who did they? No, they had Toulon, right? They lost to Toulon. Yeah. They lost to Toulon. It was the Sharks had Bordeaux. They lost to Toulon, and they lost to, was it Saracens at home, I think? Yeah, so not brilliant from them. They lost to Northampton Saints at home. That's who it was. Saints were really good in that game too, but they lost to Saracens away. So not a brilliant, run for them in the Champions Cup. Excuse me. And they actually went into the last round of the Champions Cup as the only team who couldn't, with absolutely no chance of qualifying for the last 16 as well. So for them now, it's down to the URC. They've been finalists twice in this competition, so they probably feel like that they're kind of due lifting the trophy at this stage. But it's games like this, that they have to win in order to kind of keep up there in that top four, and they've got 2 games in hand, obviously, as well, that could help them kind of put pressure on the likes of Glasgow and Leinster there at the top of the table. But, I think I'm going to go for a home win in this, and I think the Lions might pull something out. So I'm going to go for a Lions win in that one. Okay, so on to the next one then, and it is Scarlets versus Edinburgh. So this one is Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff. It's 6 versus 8. It's at the Parky Scarlets. And again, on Premier Sport, Now TV, and URC TV as well. Okay, so Scarlets, they've been kind of the, one of the better Welsh teams this year. Last year was the Ospreys kind of on their own. And then, the likes of Scarlets, Dragons, and Cardiff were all kind of down there in like the bottom 5 or so teams, I think, in the league, especially when the Sharks kind of moved up there towards the end. But Scarlets have certainly been better this year. Last year, they were, you could see that the abilities there in terms of their attack, but defense was poor. That's certainly been better this year. Pack seem to be, have a bit more steel about them, and they're putting themselves in positions where they're getting close. Even if they don't win the game, they're getting close in games as well. And if we look at kind of the form, we can kind of see that, like, lost by a point to Connacht, although like Dwayne Peel got massively criticised for that one because they were actually winning in the last couple of minutes in that one, and then Connacht snatched it. But you could see it was, before that they had close results as well. Then they went on a winning run, beat Cardiff by 6. They beat the Bulls by a point, and then they beat Zebre by 22. Then lost to Glasgow by 2 points, so very respectable there. Against very tough Glasgow side, and then lost to the Ospreys by 1. That's a game I think that they would have targeted to win and kind of keep themselves up there in the comfortably kind of in the playoff places, rather than kind of have to sweat it. And then beat the Dragons fairly comprehensively by 17 points. Then on the New Year's Day game between those two. So certainly decent form for them compared to the earlier on in the season, and also last year as well, where they weren't they weren't doing as well. But I think that pretty sure, they drew against Benetton right in the opening game, and that kind of was a signal in terms of Scarlets haven't improved and Benetton haven't gone backwards as well, compared to last season. Edinburgh then, just summary. Scarlets have won 4 of the last 7 and lost 2 to 3. Edinburgh have won 4 of their last 7 as well, but not as streaky as Scarlets won. So they started the run with heavy loss by 34 points to the Lions. That was the one where they were 40 odd points to 0 down at half time, and then rallied to score, I think it was 3 tries or something in the second half, right? And make the score look a little bit more respectable. Only losing 50 odd to 21 or wherever it was. I think it was 55-21, something like that. Then bounced back from that by beating the Storms by 31 points. And then they beat Cardiff by 19 points. And you think, okay, they're in a bit of form. Then they lose the Ospreys by 9 points. And from that then bounce back, beat Benetton by 17 points. Then, they lose to Glasgow by 19 points, and then a win against Glasgow then in return in that game. Is the 1872 Cup it's called? And then they lose that one by they won that one by 3 points, but Glasgow won the cup because obviously 19 is a bigger margin than 3. But at least, they got the win in that one. And like, other than that game where it was only a 3-point victory, you're kind of thinking, well, there aren't that many losing bonus points happening in Edinburgh games. Like, it's either, they win by a couple of scores or they lose by a couple of scores for the main part. But yeah, Edinburgh and Scarlets at the moment, like, Scarlets have 23 points, Edinburgh have 22 points, and they're in 6th and 7th in the league. So it's very tight between the two of them, and the winner is going to stay in that kind of area. If teams above them lose, obviously they're going to move up as well, and they're going to feel like they're in that kind of top pack there. The loser, though, is probably going to drop a number of spots. You could easily see one of these teams dropping maybe 4 or 5 places, and going from being in there in the top 8 to suddenly down in 10th or 11th or something like that. So again, I think it's it's a significant game for these two here, and it's another one of those ones where you're playing a rival who could be a rival like at the end of the season to actually maybe clinch 8th spot or something like that. So a win in this game would make that a much easier job for you. If you can beat your rival, when you play them, and especially at this stage of the season, you could actually have just that little bit of a cushion that helps you, when it comes down to that final round. So with this one, I think again, I'm kind of tempted to go for Edinburgh, but they've been very up and down, and I'm going to go just for a Scarlets win in this. I think there'll be some really good rugby down the game. I think it'll be an exciting one to watch. I'm sad it's on at 3:00 because it means I won't be able to actually watch it. But yeah, I think we're probably looking at both teams getting bonus points out of it. But I think Scarlets in the end will have just enough to win the game. And it could even be, a losing bonus point for Edinburgh, which they haven't got in ages. So Edinburgh could actually get 2 bonus points out of the game if my prediction's right. We'll move on to the next one then. So it's my own team, Leinster, and they're playing against DHL Stormers. It is on Saturday, January 25th. It's a 5:00 kickoff. It's 1st versus 10th. Like, normally you expect Stormers to be a lot higher up than 10th. Like, and this has been a big game, kind of, in the short history of URC. This has been a big fixture. It's at the Viva Stadium. It's on Premier Sport and TG Car. So some good. And TG Car, I really like their rugby coverage, honestly. I think they do a really good job at it. And it just kind of shows as well, it's a TV station that doesn't have much of a budget, but it shows that you can really do a decent job, on a low budget, with stuff like that. But yeah, like, you've got, the Leinster, 100% in the URC so far, 100% in the Champions Cup. Stormers, last year they had a poor start to the season, and then it came back. I think they finished 5th on the log in the end, and but then didn't do all that well in in the playoffs. So maybe this year again it's going to be the same trajectory where they kind of come from outside the playoffs and finish in them. But I don't know whether it's whether they're going to have enough, even if Leinster are kind of stripped of, like, was it 23 of the 30 odd players in the Ireland squad, 36 I think. So 23 of those are from Leinster, but I still think Leinster probably have enough to win this one. We could potentially. It would be exciting if we did get a repeat of was it 2 seasons ago? There were 22 all between these two. I think Stormers got out to a lead, was it 17-0? They were winning, and then Leinster got back to 17 all. They went ahead 22-17, and Stormers then scored a late try and then missed a kick to potentially win the game as well. So that was an exciting one. Obviously, as a Leinster fan, I'd love to win the game, but if you had a repeat of that, certainly it would be an exciting watch. And I like watching exciting games, even that's, sometimes it's at the cost of my own team as well. Like, just an example, the last 3 Champions Cup finals have been very exciting, even though my team's lost every single one of them. But we look at the form book. So Leinster, last 7, beat Benetton by 30, beat Munster by 14, beat Connacht by 21, beat the Lions by 18, beat Ulster by 7, then Connacht by 8, and Munster by 21. So, they won all the games, so don't be surprised that they've won the last 7. Stormers then, they beat Zebre by 31, then lose against Edinburgh by the same margin, 31. Beat Munster by 15, then they lose to Glasgow by 11. Beat the Sharks lost to the Sharks by 6, sorry. Then they beat the Lions by 19, and then they beat the Sharks in the return game by 4 points. So, Stormers at the moment, like, they're in that kind of little cluster of teams who are, who on reputation you would say should be up there challenging for a playoff spot. You got the likes of Benetton, Munster, Stormers. You've got Lions and Connacht there as well, kind of in that little group, and then Ospreys kind of hanging on to the tail of those as well. And all those teams certainly would have claims, to at least be in the conversation again for playoff places. And it just shows how competitive the league has been this year. You can throw a blanket over so many teams, like, from, again, Ospreys in 14th place on 17 points, up to the Bulls in 4th place on 25 points. That's just 8 points difference between them. So, like, 2 wins basically between them. But, obviously Bulls have a couple of games still to play to kind of get to the full complement. But this one, in terms of predictions, you won't be surprised that I'm going for my own club, the home club that have won 100% of the games this year. They are going to lose this year at some stage, but I don't think it's going to be in this particular one. Okay, on to the next game then, and that is Saturday, and it's a 5:15 kickoff. It's Cardiff Rugby versus Hollywood Bet Sharks. It's 3rd versus 5th. It's the Cardiff Arms Park on Premier Sport, Night TV, and URC TV. Okay, so we have like the one of the big games really of the weekend. In terms of where the teams are positioned in the league. It is the biggest fixture of the weekend. With both teams in the top 5, so you can't really argue with that. Certainly on the reputation of teams in terms of what they've done previously in this competition, you would probably say that maybe Leinster Stormers is a bigger game, but certainly not in terms of how teams have been this year and how competitive these two teams should be against each other as well. So we start with the form for Cardiff. So Cardiff, we're on a poor run of form. They started actually well, obviously, and they were up there, and then they had a poor run of form, and then they recovered again after that. So, the last 7, lost to Glasgow by 16. I'm pretty sure that was when, Cardiff, along with Leinster, they were the only 2 teams that were still unbeaten in the league. So, they would have had kind of a, kind of confidence going into that game against Glasgow, but Glasgow just kind of showed their class and kind of how much further along they are in their journey than this young Cardiff team, who I think are a good team with lots of potential. But there's lots of teams in this league that have plenty of potential. It's about whether the players and the coaches can get things right to unlock that potential and take a step forward. And this is going to be a game, I think, for Cardiff, for them to show if they do have that. But then lost to Scarlets by 6. They lost to Edinburgh by 19. Then a string of wins. So 2-point win against Ulster, which was an amazing comeback in that game to be able to do that. and then they beat the Dragons by 8, beat the Dragons again by 2, and then they drew against Ospreys in the New Year's Day fixture there. So 3 wins and a draw from the last 7 with 3 losses, but it's basically been 3 losses, then 3 wins, and then the draw. So maybe they're going to draw 3 in a row. Who knows? Onto the Sharks then. They've actually won 5 of the last 7. So they started out with 3-point win against Dragons, then lost heavily against Benetton by 28. Then they beat Glasgow by 4. Nice scalp for them to take. Defending champions. Then they beat Munster by 17, so the champions from the season before. Then they beat the Stormers by 6, so that's the inaugural URC champions as well. So 3 on the bounce. They beat the last 3 champions of the league, and then just to cap it all off as well, beat the Bulls by 3. So they beat the losing finalists as well in that one too. So really good kind of run of form for them, and then a loss then to the Stormers by 4 points after that. But Sharks have been kind of again another team that are up and down selection. Honestly, the Sharks compared to the others, because we knew that the Bulls did it last year in terms of selection in the Champions Cup, but the Sharks actually took the Challenge Cup seriously and they ended up with a trophy. But in the Champions Cup didn't quite work out for them. They did give Toulouse a decent game though. Losing by 20 points to 8, but then in the final round then just lost so heavily that Ulster ended up overtaking them. So is this where they kind of bounce back, or do they kind of give Cardiff, a win against, what is on paper a big team, big squad, lots of great players in their team, and that could be a big confidence builder for Cardiff. And yeah, it's a tough one to pick. I'm going to go for a Cardiff win in that one though. Okay, on to the next game then, and it is Dragons versus Munster. It's a 7:35 kickoff on Saturday, 16th versus 11th. It's at Rodney Parade. It's on Premier Sport and RTE, also Now TV and URC TV as well. So, Dragons have been very poor this season. Just the 1 win, and that came very early. Was that in the first round they won? Did they beat? Was it them that beat Ospreys in a bit of a shock in the first round? I know Ospreys lost in the first round. I think it was. I can actually check it. That'd be a good idea, right? But I think it was. I think they beat them in the first round. Let me just pull it up here though. Yeah, 23-21. Sometimes my old man memory isn't that bad. But yeah, that was a decent win for them. But since then, nothing really. They've got some bonus points out of the games that lost and stuff. But yeah, not really getting that close to another victory. And if Zebre pick up another win, I think given how these two teams went last year as well, Dragons could really struggle to get off the bottom of the table before the end of the season. So and look at their opponents. Munster have been up and down a bit, but in the Champions Cup, although they're not winning all the games, you can see that there's an improvement there. Set pieces getting better. The attack is looking more fluid. It's still not there in terms of just being as slick as it was 2 seasons ago, but they still, starting to look a bit better, and kind of similar as well to that season where they started off poorly, and then as the season went on, the cohesion improved, and so did performances and results as well. But if we look at the form book, so Dragons lost their last 7 games. They basically lost their last 8 games, right? Because they only won the first one. But lost against the Sharks by 3, then the Lions by 4, then Benetton by 10, Connacht by 24, Cardiff by 8, Cardiff again by 2, and then against the Scarlets by 17. Munster have won 3 of the last 7, so they started out with a win, or the last 7 they started with a win by 23 against Ospreys, then lost to Leinster by 14, lost to Stormers by 15, lost to Sharks by 17, then a little mini revival, 7-point win against the Lions, followed by a 3-point win against Ulster, which was a very good performance by them, and then lost against Leinster by 21. So in this one, given Dragons have been on this long run of losses, I it's hard to see them breaking it in this one, so I'm going to go for a Munster win there. Okay, on to the next game, and it is Glasgow Warriors versus Connacht. So this is the rearranged game from Friday night, and it's a 5:30 kickoff on Sunday, January 26th. It's 2nd versus 13. So it's Scotstoun Stadium. It's Premier Sports and TG Cahir, and Now TV and URC TV as well. Okay, so defending champions Glasgow against Connacht, who have been so up and down in the URC this year. In the Challenge Cup, though, certainly found a bit of consistency. Winning all 4 of their games and actually, they go through to the knockout stages of that competition as the number 1 seed. So fair play to them for that. But you have to say, Warriors in Scotstoun, it's going to be a tough ask for them. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm wearing the jersey as well, so you know who I'm going to be cheering for. Although it's close, because Glasgow are one of my, one, if not my favourite, certainly they're in my top kind of 2 or 3 non-Irish teams like to cheer for. So it's but still you got to back the Irish team, right? But I do like a bit of Glasgow, I have to say it. But as well, Glasgow defending champions, and they're up there 2nd place in the league for a reason. They've been decent this year as well. Maybe not quite hitting the heights as last year in terms of just being consistent, but when they have hit the heights this year, they've just been completely unplayable. And yes, they might have the same thing where players are unavailable because of the Six Nations, but they've got, they won the league last year, not based on having like a decent, match day 23, although they certainly do. It's more of a squad, right? You have to have a really good squad to make sure that you're up there kind of, in the top few teams to make life a little bit easier in terms of your progress through the knockout stages as well. They did things the hard way in the end, like to win it. So, but yeah, they were up there, like up until kind of the last couple of rounds. They were right up there with Leinster, for the bulk of last season, even beating Leinster in the opening game, I think, last year as well. And that's down to your squad being able to do that. So given that, and the fact that Connacht are, especially in this competition, up and down so much, I'm going to go for a Glasgow win, but I definitely will be cheering for Connacht. But Glasgow, as I said, I like watching them too. So I feel like I'm going to be the winner out of this one anyway, kind of watching it, because one, I think it's going to be a really entertaining game because both teams, can throw the ball around, and both teams can score in bursts as well, which means that even if there's like a 2-score gap, that can be very quickly, eliminated or like erased, and then you're back in like, kind of on a knife edge again, and also, 2 very likable teams too. So, the winner out of that game, I think, is going to be me, because, I'm going to get home to, I'll be able to watch at least the second half of the game live. But what I'll probably do is try and avoid any updates on my way home, and then just rewind it back to the start and watch it from there all the way through. And then after that, then I'll probably watch the Ulster game as well, which is next one up. But yeah, I'm going for Glasgow win in that one. And then next, then we have Ulster versus Zebre Palmer. So this one is it's kind of it's an interesting one because Ulster have been they had a torrid time in the Champions Cup, got absolutely destroyed. In basically all of their games, apart from the last one, where they won, very comprehensively against Exeter, and that was enough. Coupled with, the Sharks' heavy loss against Bordeaux for them to qualify for the round of 16 in that competition. So, kind of interesting. I think Ulster, they're bringing through young players there, especially like Richie Murphy's son there at 10 coming through as well. Him and Aidan Morgan, I think, are good options at 10. Like Ulster, I think, will certainly benefit, in terms of having Cooney there as well at 9 for them. Although, Cooney, pretty sure he's moving on at the end of the season, and it's one of the reasons why kind of Doak had been starting a lot there at 9. But I think Cooney's going to be the starting 9 for this one. But they've got a decent young team there. They're against a Zebre team who are certainly improving in the league, but I think away wins for Zebre are not going to be in huge supply this season. But you can see maybe in a season or two where Zebre coming to town will be a very different prospect than it has been kind of in past seasons. But for now, we look at how the last 7 games have gone for each. So Ulster, first of all, losing heavily down South Africa against the Bulls by 26, then beat Connacht by 5, beat Ospreys by 24, then a losing streak of 3 games, 2-point loss to Cardiff, a 7-point loss to Leinster, and then a 3-point loss to Munster. Then bounced back a little bit with a 10-point win against Connacht. So did a double over Connacht in those 7 games. And then, as I said, in between, kind of, they had kind of the 2 kind of Christmassy games, and before that were 2 heavy losses in the Champions Cup, followed by another heavy loss in the Champions Cup, and then a decent win. Zebre then they just won 1 of their last 7, but it's not all that often that Zebre get wins back to back or anything like that. If you look at like last season, it was just an accomplishment that they got a win by the end of the season. But we look at but this season, obviously they beat Munster. Was it in the second? I'm pretty sure it was in the second round, right? They beat Munster, but then of this run of 7, lost by 31 points to the Stormers. Then lost by 30 points to Glasgow. Just a 1 point defeat against the Lions showed again, that to have that competitiveness at home. Then they lose by 22 points against Scarlets. Then they beat the Ospreys by 5 points. Lose to Benetton just by a single point, which was a great performance by them. And then lost by 12 points in the return against Benetton as well. So, they're getting closer to Benetton. They're getting closer to a lot of teams in this league as well. But again, going, to the Kingspan and getting a win, I think is maybe, a few seasons away from them just yet. So I'm going to go for an Ulster win in that one. Okay. And then, that kind of wraps up, the, round 10 preview. A lot of, at least we've got my prediction, is going to be a lot of home wins, which means that we'll probably have the most away wins of any of the rounds so far. But again, some big games in terms of teams who are really looking to, get into that top 8 or stay in that top 8. And because it's so close as well, one team losing, another team winning, they could almost completely swap places in the table, going from, one team dropping out of the top 8 and the other team jumping up into it as well. But there's going to be lots more changes, before we actually have that final top 8 at the end of the season as well. This is the start of the second half of the season for most teams. South African teams still have a couple of games to kind of, Sharks and Stormers have one more game to pick up on, but then the Bulls and the Lions have 2 games in hand at the minute. But yeah, I think again it's an exciting round just because of the things I talked about earlier, the potential to see a lot of kind of young talent on show there, guys with a chance to really show what they're all about, chances for teams to kind of ignite their season again as well, and get some decent form, even though we're going to be kind of have an interrupted run now because of the Six Nations, but still, if you can get that win and suddenly you're sitting higher up the table, it just does a huge boost to the confidence. And as well, when your wider squad, players from your wider squad get the win too, I think it has a great effect on the whole team because, when the big boys, as it were, come back and they're these guys then maybe have to go back to holding tackle bags or wherever they're doing. At least they can do it, knowing that they've played their part when they got the chance on the field as well. But yeah, that's the end of this one. Let me know what you think down in the comments.